All right, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for attending live and then in person and both online, and for those in the future, hopefully, that are watching this recording. This is the first of our fall series on connecting the dots in academia. So this is the first of 4, and then hopefully next semester we'll have a couple as well. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Erika Miller. I'm an assistant professor here in systems engineering. For those that have had a class with me, know that I like it as interactive as possible. So for those online, please use the chat window with any questions or comments, even if it's, doesn't seem like it's going to be incredibly insightful. It's always nice to see that, you're still alive online. And those in person as well, please feel free to interrupt with any questions or comments you have as this goes forward. All right, so the first talk is on how to succeed in academia, and I'll unpack what that means here on this next slide. You can imagine there's a lot to cover when we're talking about how to be successful in academia. So brief background, perhaps, on how this series came about will help you scope on what we're going to talk about today and in the forthcoming seminars this semester. So I kind of named this one the graduate student mindset, really aimed at giving you all tips for either transitioning if you're, freshly into grad school, either as straight from undergrad, or if you've been in industry for many years and you're coming in trying to get back into, that academic mindset after, many years perhaps outside of academia. But then also trying to, be a good refresher for those perhaps that have been in academia for a while and, just want to make sure that you can continue to be successful as you're on that finish line to finishing up. So this is really a combination of, things that we've talked about, in our department from, faculty and staff on questions that have come up many times from our students' challenges, just things that a lot of people don't know that we just, perhaps assume that people know. And so this is intended to just compile, what common misconceptions are and, the aim to make you as successful as possible. So again, if you have any questions, please ask. This is meant to make you more successful. So if there's a topic that I didn't hit on and you think it's crucial, that's completely possible. All right. So like I mentioned, this is really, largely compiled from just discussions that I've had with, other folks in the department, looking back on when I was a grad student, what I struggled with or what my triumphs were. And then I did a brief, look at the literature on, what has been talked about and, what's going to make you successful for grad school. So I tried to compile it down into 5 tips, and we're going to, dive deep into each of these and see what those mean throughout. So kind of the 5 that we're going to be focusing on today is, learning how to use our resources wisely. So what are the resources available? And then how do you use those, in an appropriate and wise way? Knowing what your program requirements are and the timelines for that. Being proactive and practicing time management. Utilizing your advisor and being passionate about your work. And so we're going to dive into each of these. So the first one is learning how to use your resources wisely. And so first part is, what resources are out there available for you all. And this is definitely not a comprehensive, fully exhaustive list, but these are some that, again, I always find students don't necessarily know, where to find them at. So the first one here is our systems engineering website. Hopefully, that looks familiar to you all. If not, that's all right. The URL is provided. So I would highly encourage people to, read that, thoroughly over and over again, get really familiar with all the content. Usually when a student asks me a question, I, really quickly secretly open up our website and I look for the answer for them. And then I let them know, like, it was in my mind the whole time. So certainly, I utilize this resource all the time. So please, especially look at this student resources page. I screen grabbed kind of the one section here that I think kind of has the most rich amount of information. One is our student handbook. So if you read through that, you'll see, what the requirements are for the program, just, expectations, etc. So definitely please look through that. There's also a secure file access, perhaps maybe not like the most obvious thing on this page. And so sometimes people overlook it pretty quickly. And so I just wanted to take a minute, right? It's this one here at the bottom for those that are in person. If you click on that, you log in through your engineering ETS account. So not the same as like your at Rams or at Colorado State. You have to actually like separately set that account up. And I have a link to that resource coming up here as well, I believe. And then there's some files there that are available only to students that are within our program, mostly aimed to those who are, in the PhD track or doing research. But I would encourage you to look at that if you are in the research track or you're wondering if that is the track that you should be going down. And then the third thing that I want to point everyone towards that oftentimes there's questions about is the forms. And so you'll find, pretty much all the forms that you have to fill out throughout your academic career here on this webpage as well, or at least you'll know what the forms are and when you should fill them out. So hopefully after this, y'all get really familiar with this website, if you're not yet. The next one that I wanted to point everyone towards is Mountain Scholar, and that is basically a website that houses dissertations and theses for most of the academic institutions in Colorado and Wyoming. And so oftentimes, and thinking back when I had to do a master's thesis and a PhD, I learned a lot from reading other people's work just to kind of see, what's the format, what kind of depth should I be going into? So there can be a lot learned from looking at previous ones. And you can look at any of them across, any of the institutions in Colorado or Wyoming. And the link I provided here specifically towards the ones in our department. So the Department of Systems Engineering. And so you can, perhaps scale more on, what's expected for a systems engineering thesis or dissertation. Or even just read what other students are working on in this program if you're still a little confused what systems engineering is. So please utilize that resource too, I guess is my point here. And then the kind of the third, collection of resources that I wanted to point everyone towards is CSU's cloud storage and collaborative document working place that we all have access to. And so if you click that top link there, that basically gives you the directions on how to use both the Office 365 suite and then also the Google Apps suite. So usually, right, people probably know that you have an at coloradostate.edu account and you can log in and get, access on the OneDrive, access to Word and Excel and PowerPoint. If you don't know that, good news, you can stop paying for that on your own and utilize the CSU software license for that. But what is often not known is that you also have access to a Google Suite. So if you do the same EID, so for example, mine is Erika3, right? So if I type Erika3 at rams.coloradostate.edu into Google, I can log in and I have access to Google Drive, and I think it's unlimited. I have yet to hit the cap or anywhere near cap on my Google Drive. And absolutely all of my documents are housed on Google Drive, so I can be at home on my laptop, come on my desktop, here at work. I can, easily share a document with any of my colleagues or any of my students that we're working on a paper with. And so, right, with that opportunity comes, using Google Docs, Google Sheets, any of those online. So anytime I work on a paper with one of my students, it's usually through Google Docs, so we can, actively be working on the exact same document. And all that, again, is available through your rams.coloradostate.edu account. So hopefully excited some people with that, and you explore that opportunity as well, because that's a great resource as well. And then kind of getting towards maybe the bulk or maybe the inspiration for this first talk is that emphasis point of, all right, well, we have the resources, but that wisely component is really important. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, how to utilize the literature that you're reading, both in publications, in papers, in dissertations, in theses, in just course material that you're submitting. And so we're not running into any plagiarism issues. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about in this next little section here. So one of the big components about being a grad student is, you're here because you want to be a subject matter expert. You learn the base knowledge and you want to dive a lot deeper into that. And really one of the crucial ways to becoming a subject matter expert is to read, and you have to read a lot. If you came into grad school hoping you could, avoid reading because, you're in an engineering program and you didn't think reading would be a part of it, well, let me be the first to tell you that you're gonna be reading a ton in grad school. There's really only so much, right, that your professors can share the knowledge of in a lecture, 3 hours a week or whatever that might be. And then outside of school, right, when you graduate, you want to still be a leading subject matter expert. So you really have to learn to read, synthesize, know where to find that information at. And so that's why I put this as kind of that iterative cycle, right? First, we need to read a lot. And so I'm going to show you some more sources on, how to get, quality academic caliber material. And then we want to synthesize it. And I'll talk about what that means too. It's not just, regurgitating exactly what you read, copy and pasting, right? Showing that, again, you're a subject matter expert and you've, put a little thought into what you read. And then inquire, right? So hopefully you're reading a lot. You're starting to, push the boundaries on what's already been done in that field. And you're thinking about new things that could be explored in that territory. So you're starting to expand, the knowledge base there, and then repeat, right? You gotta, maybe you have a new direction to go. And so you're going to start, exploring that and reading that as well. So that's the cycle of utilizing your resources and presenting them in whatever form that might be. Again, if that's a research project or a class paper. So a huge component of that, right, is properly giving credit to where credit is due. And so let's what that looks like here. So the first thing, right, the first step in being able to properly cite is you got to find something worthy of citing. You got to find where you're going to get your reading list from. So there's two, again, resources that I'm going to point you towards, right? The theme of this is using your resources.
Recording in progress.
Put them in. Let me see here. Second. All right, I think we fixed it. I don't think I fixed it, but someone miraculously fixed that. Sorry about that. So the first, maybe I'll just jump to that bottom one. I don't, again, know why I put it in this order, but Google Scholar. A lot of people don't necessarily know that, scholar.google.com is a website that you can go to. So instead of, going to Google and searching those keywords to find, information relevant to maybe your professor asked you to, write a couple paragraphs about, whatever the topic might be, and you go to Google and you search those keywords and you're really excited you found some websites, right? That's pretty good, but that's not really what the academic caliber of literature is that you should be searching for. And so really you should be searching at, published books, peer-reviewed journal articles, peer-reviewed conference proceedings, something that was, vetted by other subject matter experts, went through the process, and is, that high caliber of work that you should be looking at in grad school and, postgraduate school work. So I always go to Google Scholar and that's how I start any, literature review or any, research that I want to do. So again, scholar.google.com, and I type in some keywords and I find a bunch of, papers, and they all look great. I open them, I usually read the abstract, if it truly does seem consistent with what I'm interested in, further citing or further learning about. Oftentimes, Google Scholar is great for getting those abstracts and, getting the lay of the land of what the research is, but they don't always have, a PDF version of that paper there, or, there's usually a pay block, stopping you from being able to actually see the full document. And so that's when that CSU library link is great. And that's what I have that screen grab of here. So oftentimes people don't realize that you have access to this off campus, but you do. So you can go to this. And if you look in that screen grab, it's really hard to see for those maybe online, because you can't probably see my hand, but those in the classroom says off-campus access there. Or, it's just kind of that top right side of the screen, and you just log in with your EID credentials, and it gets around all of those pay blocks essentially. And so I usually just copy and paste whatever the name of that article is that I saw on Google Scholar, and I can get a free copy of that PDF. So again, that does not have to be on CSU, internet. I'm at home all the time on this off-campus library website. So I would really encourage y'all, if you've never used this before, please do. That's probably honestly one of the best ways to be successful in grad school, is to be reading the appropriate literature and getting full access to it, not just those abstracts. All right, so let's walk through an example. So let's walk through kind of what an appropriate use of synthesizing the literature looks like. And I apologize if this is a little bit small and hard to read, but I'll walk you through what the important parts here are. I think I need to put my glasses on for this. So this is an excerpt from a paper. There's the literature, the introduction section of a paper I wrote a couple years ago for the Journal of Human Factors. And it's just a random paper that I pulled for this example here. And while this is for a journal publication, this is completely applicable for something you'd be expected to write in a course here in the systems engineering department, or really any grad school class. So let's first, read through this, and then we're going to pick it apart and really understand why I put this here. So I'll read it to you all. So previous studies have examined driving behaviors under manual, semi-automated, and highly automated driving conditions. The effectiveness of semi-automated systems, such as adaptive cruise control, has not always been consistent. Some studies show that situation awareness and detection accuracy increase, in other words, better performance for drivers with ACC is engaged. However, Rudin, Brown, and Parker found that ACC increased response time to a hazard detection task, meaning worse performance. So in general, these studies suggest that the presence of ACC may alleviate some of the demands of the driving task, but that drivers may also offset this positive performance increase with more secondary task engagement. So that's kind of this paragraph, this excerpt we're gonna kind of work through, and you'll notice, right, there's this reference from Ma and Caber 2005, one by Funk, Matthews, Worm and Emo 2007. There's one by De Winter et al. In 2014, and then Rudin Parker in 2004, right? So we have about 4 or so different references cited here. So let's walk through that. So I picked this because I think it does perhaps not the best, but a pretty good job synthesizing it. And it's relatively short example, right? There's a lot packed in here. So the first kind of step that I usually approach when I'm, trying to synthesize the literature is, think of this as one paragraph. It's a standalone paragraph, and it could certainly be much longer and exaggerated, but again, trying to keep this brief, right? You want to start the paragraph, probably in your own words, letting the reader know what they're about to get into, right? Providing some context on what those forthcoming references are going to be about. And so in this example, right, we cued the audience in knowing that we're talking about previous studies. It's about driving behavior under various levels of vehicle automation, all the way from completely no automation to partially automated, all the way to highly or fully automated driving. And we're talking about the effectiveness on these, and specifically, we're going to be looking at adaptive cruise control, right? What does adaptive cruise control do to the drivers? So that's right. That's the first paragraph. There's the first sentence there, right? Just kind of providing in your own words, absolutely no references there, what is about to be coming. And then the next section is, synthesizing those references, right? And so absolutely nowhere in there is, quotes that I'm just, copying, pasting, or regurgitating, what the audience could read if they just simply went to those other papers, right? And so what you'll see is I pasted the direct quotes that I was, synthesizing in my own words here, and you'll notice that they're pretty different. And in fact, this paragraph could probably be a lot longer if I directly used what was from those other sources, right? So this Ma and Caber, right? So this first one is that Ma and Caber, they looked at, what people's situation awareness when they were driving in a car with adaptive cruise control. And they found that their situation awareness increased, or they were better drivers because they had ACC engaged, right? That's kind of the takeaway. And how I got to there was I read, that from Moncaber, that top bullet. The plot reveals that on average, drivers exhibited better situation awareness when ACC was active. And actually the way that I found that is I didn't originally find Moncaber's article. I read this other article, the second bullet by De Winter et al. And that was a meta-analysis. So they basically compiled a bunch of literature on related work. And so I wanted to make sure I gave credit to De Winter et al. Because they were actually the ones that led me towards Moncaber. So you'll notice right in this, I say, within the actual sentence itself, I give credit to Moncaber. I let you know exactly where you could go to read that. More about situation awareness, but then at the very end of the sentence, right, I give credit to De Winter et al. 2014 because again, they helped lead me towards this paper. And they also, right, in that meta-analysis is how I discovered the second one by Funk et al. In 2007, right? And their exact quote was, the influence of vehicle automation compared with free driving showed enhanced driver attention as indicated by detection of secondary task stimuli. So, right, you could paste that into your paragraph, but right, the audience could just go and read that paper and get that same information, right? You want to prove that you read it and you thought about how that relates to what you're talking about, right? Not just in the context of there. So, again, that's this really crucial skill in graduate school work of being able to read it, think about what that means and maybe relate it to your context. Right, so that's kind of that example here. And then the second part is the second quote, and let's just read this exact quote from Rudin, Brown, and Parker. From that paper, they said, compared to driving unsupported, participants located significantly more items per minute on a secondary task when using ACC, while their response times to a hazard detection task increased, right? So that tells us that they were having participants work on a secondary task, and while they were able to, notice more hazards, they were a lot slower to respond. And so, right, and that's what's important. You want to show that there was in this paragraph, I'm trying to show that there's some inconsistency. Some say that the presence of vehicle automation makes you a better driver, and in some cases it makes you a worse driver. And this is a great example of it making you a worse driver because it's making you, respond slower to hazards, which, right, as you can imagine, if you respond really quick to a vehicle braking in front of you and all of a sudden you're slower because, you're trusting your vehicle automation, that's going to be, adverse on your driving performance, right? And so that's why in this, right, I made sure to say, ACC increased response time to a hazard task, but maybe, for those people that aren't familiar with how human factors research goes, they're like, I don't know what, increased response time really means. So that's why, again, in my own words, I said, i.e. that means worse performance. So again, just the skill of reading and then, re-articulating it in your own words is crucial, right? You want to show that you're the subject matter expert and you've tackled that knowledge. And then the last sentence here, before you move on, is just making sure that the readers got that point. Like, what was the point of putting all that there? And so in this, right, again, I synthesized it. In my own words, I explained why it mattered and how it related to my objective. I said in general, these studies suggest that the presence of ACC may alleviate some of the demands of the driving task, but that drivers may also offset these positive performance increases with more secondary task engagement, right? So in case you got, lost in the weeds of all those references, you can read that last paragraph or last sentence and you're like, all right, got it. There's some inconsistencies in the literature because, you might offset those gains that you get by, having all these mental resources available to not necessarily pay attention to how fast your car is traveling or that headway between you and the vehicle in front of you. So you're going to pick up your phone maybe in text, right? So just kind of synthesize that point in that last sentence. So that's, one example of how to synthesize literature and then properly, again, provide those references. So I have a couple examples of, a poor way of doing this. Again, that's not, the only way. There's not, one way to do these references, but that's a pretty, I think, typical way to format it. So let's look at what not to do. So what you'll notice I did not do is I didn't read a bunch of articles and then I copy and pasted all of those direct quotes in. And right, I still put quotes and I still gave references, and I didn't by any means plagiarize any work, because I still was like, hey, I didn't do this, it's in quotes, it's good to go. So you're properly referencing there, right? But you're not synthesizing. So, maybe this would be all right in a 100 level undergrad class, because you're getting into that practice, but at a 500 or 600 level grad class, right? This isn't what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to, again, become the new subject matter experts, right? Expand the knowledge base in the field. And so to be able to do that, you have to be able to, again, think on your own, and kind of to push the research that's already out there in a new direction. So even though, right, this does a good job referencing, it does a bad job synthesizing the literature. Here's another example. This one is a good example because it's a much too vague description of the related work, or for the reader to really understand what was performed. And this might seem a little over the top and silly, but I have seen examples of this in papers that I've read. So I don't think it's worth not discussing here. Right, so instead, maybe I say, I reviewed some books and websites, and researchers have studied how vehicle automation impacts driver behavior. Some research shows that automation improves driver behavior, while others show that automation has an adverse effect on driver behavior. Right, none of that is untrue, right? That's great. However, you have no idea how much research I looked at. What if you are really interested in this topic and you want to read more about, the examples where automation makes people worse drivers, or you want to see how it makes them better, right? You have no context of, where to look. And you also don't have any idea of, how they are worse drivers. Is it because they're driving off the road and crashing into trees? Is it because they're picking up their phone and talking, right? There's not enough information. It does show that you did some research and you thought about it, and perhaps you synthesized it to some degree, but you certainly, right, you're not doing, again, thinking that grad school level of work. And again, this is applicable to both if you're writing a publication to, writing a weekly assignment for one of your courses. This is a crucial thing to learn. All right. So, right, that kind of leads into this idea of academic integrity and plagiarism. So academic integrity and plagiarism, essentially, if we were to boil that down really simply, it means, claiming someone else's work or intellectual property as your own, without giving, proper reference or proper credit to those that did this, this original work. And at the university, we really do not have a distinction in sanctions about, plagiarism, whether you did it accidentally or, intentionally. And so what that means is that if, I read your homework assignment and I notice that you plagiarized on it. Sorry, one second. So if I notice that you plagiarized on it, and I confront you about it and you say, oh, it was on accident, I didn't mean to, I meant to put that reference there, right? You're still going to get the same discipline, same sanctions as if you had intentionally did it. So this, pleading of ignorance is not an acceptable excuse in this university setting. So this is a really important, piece to really understand here. So let's walk through all the examples, what constitutes academic integrity and plagiarism. So I boiled it down to these 6 examples here. So the first one probably is what most people are familiar with, and perhaps what you usually think of when you think about academic integrity. It's cheating, so using unauthorized sources of information and providing or receiving unauthorized assistance on any form of academic work. Right, so think, getting help on an exam. I give a take-home exam, but I tell you, you have to do it on your own, and you get maybe, your boss to help you or your spouse to help you, right? So that would be a good example of cheating. Plagiarism, that second one there, is copying of language, structure, ideas, or thoughts of another. and representing them as one's own work without proper acknowledgement, right? So that's, maybe copying, a student's homework from another year, or getting those references and, failing to cite De Winter et al. That they, were the first to really discover that paper that led you to that. That'd be plagiarism. The third one is unauthorized possession of academic materials. So that's, selling, purchasing, or stealing exams or other academic work. Using information from or possessing exams that an instructor has not authorized for release to students. Right, so that would be, maybe selling your answers to future students in the class and essentially giving you really good ideas, I guess, to make money and to plagiarize, but right, don't do these. Or, getting an exam from the previous year from a student because, right, if it wasn't, authorized for release by the professor, right, that's unauthorized possession of academic materials. So don't do that. The fourth one there is falsification. So that's any untruth, either verbal or written, in one's academic work, right? So I put that picture there of Pinocchio, kind of with the elongated nose, right? So making false claims or lying in your work. That's another form of academic integrity. The fifth one there is facilitation. So knowingly assisting another to commit an act of academic misconduct. So, just saying that, I wasn't the one that cheated, but I gave the assignment solutions to this person and they copied me, right? That you're still facilitating that act. And so that's another example that would be, under these sanctions for disciplinary action at the university. So, don't also help other people cheat. And then the sixth one here is kind of one that's popped up in, perhaps the last couple of years and become more of an issue. And it's the use of online solution or tutor sites. So any use of banned solution or tutor websites or their content for the reference, completing or posting to any of the graded content in a class. And so those websites include, they're not limited to, but include Chegg, NoteHall, Quizlet, Coopers. Those websites where you can pay, maybe $15 a month to join, and then students will post their, previous homeworks or, answers to solutions, exams, etc. And then you can, pull those. Or instead of having to pay, $15 a month, you can get credit if you post a bunch of the previous exams, and so you get credit, and then you get access to other people's. Right, the university has caught on to that, and we're really cracking down on that. It's been a big focus lately, so do not do that either. So you might think that I just gave you a lot of really good ideas to cheat and make your way through grad school by, not reading and not doing your own work. But perhaps the bad news or the good news for us is that it's really not as hard to catch these instances of plagiarism and cheating, both in course content, a simple assignment, all the way to maybe a thesis, a dissertation, or publishing your results in a peer-reviewed journal. So I did a screen grab of Turnitin.com. So Canvas, which is right what the university uses for the classes here. Canvas has Turnitin enabled on assignments and exams. And it's a really useful tool. I don't necessarily know what the student version of it looks like, but this is right the professor side of it, where you get a report and it searches, what would be public domain on a search engine site, but then it also searches what's been submitted to other universities. So, in a previous class, a previous year, at a university all the way across the, the United States, that might not necessarily be available if you did it on a Google search, but it is because it's in the, the Canvas and the Turnitin.com database. And it returns, right, it highlights exactly where the potential plagiarism is, and then you can hover over, each instance, and it shows you the exact, source of it, and then, right, you can make the decision whether or not, it's them, properly, citing, right? Some are completely fine. This person cited, Montgomery 2001. Although, right, it looks like it was a direct regurgitation of that source without quotes. So perhaps that's, not all right. You'd have to dive a little bit more into that and see the exact wording, et cetera, right? So know that Turnitin.com makes it relatively easy to find these instances. Also, the other way, I probably would say 60% of the time, I, discover academic dishonesty through Turnitin.com. The other part is, right, we all have our own unique rating styles. From reading through your assignments over the course of a semester, right, 16 weeks, I usually get to know what each person's writing style is like, and within a paper, right, I can, read through, and then all of a sudden, if there's one sentence or, a paragraph that doesn't necessarily flow with the rest of the writing style, it's usually a good indicator that something is off. And so I'll oftentimes copy and paste a paragraph or a section of, sentences into Google. And oftentimes it's another really easy way to notice these things. So I guess kind of the big takeaway is not to scare anyone out of, being afraid to write and reference, which is certainly not the case. It's just having that tool set of how to provide those references appropriately. And right, if you're ever in doubt, certainly ask, your professor or your advisor, whoever, and, we're here to help you succeed, not to crack down on violations of this. Right, so whenever you're in doubt, provide the reference. It's not hard to just say where you got that information from. And even when you're referencing, right, synthesize the information. Don't just use those direct quotes. I'll mark down, homework assignments, down if you just directly quote something, even if you reference it, you're not, again, showing that you're the subject matter expert in that field, and that you've mastered that concept. So that was my plagiarism spiel. Right, and that was only the first tip, right? So we have the other 4 more to go, but the other ones aren't as in-depth, I guess, is the good news there. So the other tip, again, based on just what I've seen, what I've talked about with other, members of our department, is this importance of knowing your program requirements and timelines. And again, I'm pointing you towards that student resource page, the Student Engineering Graduate Student Handbook, right? Make sure you've read that several times, have a copy of it, maybe locally somewhere on your nightstand, right? Flipping through that, be really familiar with what is expected from you. Also, right, we have a really great grad student advisor, Ingrid Bridge. She's really on top of all of those deadlines and requirements for each and every one of the students. And she will send emails, reminding you, a couple of weeks out of what's expected from you. And so I will admit, right, I don't read every single one of my emails, but I always read exactly, the emails that Ingrid sends, because I know that it's going to be important and it's going to be beneficial to probably myself and, whoever she's sending it to. And then also, right, ask your advisor, either your faculty advisor or, again, Ingrid Bridge is the grad student advisor, right? She's there to advise all the grad students. So if, you're really not sure what's expected from your program, that's a good resource to use as well. Right, and so I'm going to put this timeline, right? We have a handful of different, program paths. And so it would have been hard to put every single one here. And right, our program has some flexibility in it. And so it would have also been a really complicated diagram for myself to try to create. But right, what about the courses, right? So know your program requirements. Some of our programs have more of a strict, you have to take a certain set of classes. Some are a lot more open-ended, that as long as they're, within, systems engineering or, 500 or 600 level, right? There's flexibility in which ones you select. And so all that, again, can be found in the grad student handbook. Forms, right? I can guarantee you're going to have to fill out a couple of forms within your course or your time through academia here. Whether it's, right, if you are about to graduate or you have to turn something in, or if it's, an annual review if you're a PhD student. So, make sure you know what forms and when they're due. Some of ours require committees. Some of the students have to have, committees to review their work. So know if that's your program requirement. Some of ours require publications. So are you in a path that, a publication is required? Or, what do you plan on doing with your degree after you get it? Some people are better set up for, postgraduate life if they have some publications on their resume. And then the last one is exams. So some of our programs require you to, defend your research topic or defend your proposal. So again, a good heads up of, what's expected all the way through the route of your time here will set you up for success. So the next one was being proactive and practicing time management. So ultimately, right, you're really, responsible for your success. There's only so much guidance and help and motivation that we can do for you. While we want everyone to be successful, right, there's some onus on each of you to, be proactive about, what that path looks like for graduation. And being, effective with your time management is crucial as well, right? So knowing, what in your degree is flexible. So again, some, courses, which ones you select is flexible. Sometimes aspects of research are flexible. I like to think of research as, I don't know, maybe you can picture it like a plate of spaghetti, right? Where it's kind of a mess of noodles. You go down a path, you take some turns, you take some curves. Maybe you decide that you want to go a completely new direction, either with the method for data collection or the method for analysis, or maybe your overall research objective changes, right? So research, usually has some flexibility in how you go about it, right? There's a clear beginning and end, but how you go through that path also has some flexibility, right? And so that largely requires you to be responsible and manage your time well. And then also know what's not flexible, right? So due dates, whether that's in class or, those forms that you have to fill out, there's a reason usually for that due date. And it's outside of the purview of, your advisor or the department usually on, changing those due dates. So again, that time management aspect and being proactive about that. Right. And oftentimes deadlines, they come again, we can't control those, right? There's this hierarchy at the university, and it's going to come. And so why not eliminate that anxiety by, again, knowing what's coming. And also if it's a deadline, far out, it's a complicated project. There's nothing wrong with, creating self-imposed deadlines for progress, right? So say, you have a paper to write and you want to make sure you have that introduction done, within a month, right? So that can really help break some of these daunting tasks down. And then, right, I kind of alluded to this already, but knowing that there's a reason for a deadline is important, right? Again, whether it's a requirement from the grad school, and so if you send Ingrid a great email of giving her a really great reason why you missed a deadline, right, she'll be sympathetic, but there's, the grad school is, ultimately who she's answering to, and, they have those deadlines for a reason. Similarly in courses, right, so course integrity. If I have a homework assignment due on Sunday and I have class and lecture on Monday, right, and I want to be able to move on to the next topic, I want to be able to tell the students, what they struggled with, address any questions, right? I can't do that unless everyone is turning their homework assignment, right? So it's for the good of, the course and your peers, again, classes also have those deadlines, and also being respectful of people's time, right? So oftentimes I'll work on papers with, several different PIs or whatnot, and, I want to make sure that I give it to them with plenty of time that, just because, my Saturday afternoon is devoted to this paper doesn't mean that, theirs is going to be as well. And so just, making sure, you're respectful of, other people's, other time commitments, and give them enough time to review whatever that deadline relates to. And then the second to last, or the fourth one, I guess, is utilizing your advisor, right? So everyone in our program has an advisor, whether that's a faculty advisor or, again, the grad student advisor, right? And it's not a fluke that the name of, that person is the advisor, right? They're called the advisor for a reason. They're there to advise you, whether that's on, specific course content, whether that's on research, if that's the path you're going, whether you're having, technical issues with, not being able to figure out how to use some sort of, program or analysis or method, whatever that might be. Again, those requirements that are expected from you. And then life, right? We're probably not going to be experts or any of that, but, we all care about each of you. And so, if life comes up, don't think that it has to only be about, research or course related content for sure. So all of, our MS, PhD, and Doctor of Engineering students have a faculty advisor, right? And I would, highly encourage you to set up recurring meetings with that advisor, depending on where you are on the path, right? So if you're just starting out, you probably don't want to waste either of your time, and, weekly meetings is probably going to be a bit excessive, but, make sure, whether that's every other month or, whatever that might look like, make sure you're staying in contact with your advisor. Then all of our grad students, right, if whether you're on the research track or not on the research track, has Ingrid Bridge as their advisor. So definitely utilize her as well. And then my very last point here is be passionate about your work. Research, and even if you're not on the research track, if you're just doing the coursework, right? The coursework, research, it's hard, it takes time. Right, so you're gonna be spending a lot of time and effort on whatever that topic might be. So, right, do yourself a favor and pick one that is exciting, makes you want to spend some time, a significant chunk of time of your life, diving deeper into that and becoming the subject matter expert in that field. Right, and there's no cookie cutter template or linear process to follow through, and whatever that work product might look like. It's okay to come up to challenges and really be struggling, have to backtrack. Again, there's not a perfect template to follow. So know that, that flexibility is important. And if you're passionate and you truly love the topic that you're, doing research on, it'll be a lot more fun when, it's not cut and dry on how to finish through. And then my last point here is, you have an advisor, so you should, probably be listening to them and, following their guidance. But ultimately, right, you should be shaping the topic of whatever that research might be in a direction that you want to be the expert in, right? And so, talk with your advisor if you're not necessarily passionate about the topic, and maybe there's, somewhere you can meet in the middle, for example. Because again, right, I like this quote from Steve Jobs. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. So it's important, again, to find some aspect of it that you love, right? Not saying that every day is, perfect bliss in my job for sure. So just kind of recapping, right? Our 5 tips for success, using your resources wisely, knowing your program requirements and timelines, being proactive, practicing time management, utilizing that advisor that you have, and then again, being passionate about your work. So that's all that I had. Just a reminder that we have 3 more of these. Good news perhaps is that this is the only one I'm doing, so you'll get insight from, Dr. Conrad and Dr. Bradley coming up here in the future. So please attend those as well. And we have like 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them. Otherwise, I really appreciate all you guys' attention for this.
Erika, you did a really good point about the need to synthesize information to illustrate the expertise. I wonder if you could expand upon that a little bit, because I know a lot of students will come to me and say, they're under the expectation that we think they should know a lot, and they have to show that they know a lot. And so therefore they might get into trouble a little bit with integrity because they're trying to show they know so much and they forget to cite or they forget to do something. So how does the student kind of find the balance with showing they know a lot, but also following some really good practices?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for those online that maybe didn't catch all of that, it was, right, how do you find this balance between synthesizing little literature essentially in your own words, and showing that you read a lot, and also showing that you truly did read a lot and referencing appropriately? Yeah, that's a good question. Let me see if, oh, that's right. Yeah, I don't know if I, necessarily have a perfect answer for that. Usually, right, I err on the side of, providing too many references, throwing them in there. But usually if you feel like you need to put quotes around something, then you aren't synthesizing appropriately. So, right, it's an iterative process for sure. So, first draft, maybe put the quotes in, put all those references in, read through it a couple days later, get some feedback from someone perhaps, and right, it's not, one time and you're done. It's usually iterative. So that's a good question. I don't know if I answered that well.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question regarding self-plagiarism, defined as maybe quoting yourself or citing your own papers or even publishing your own dissertation or parts of your dissertation. I've seen some conflicting ideas about that online. Does the department have an official policy, or maybe if not, do you have an opinion on that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess, right, yeah, there's a bunch of directions with that. I guess the easiest one to answer is, in terms of coursework. So say in, one class you did an assignment, and then another class it's pretty similar, and so you want to reuse what you've done, or shape it a little bit differently. And each professor has a slightly different take on that. So usually they'll address that, within the first week. My policy is usually it's kind of on us to be creating unique assignments and ones that you can't just, completely reuse over again. And so, right, it should have some sort of spin. But that being said, usually that's, you can, talk on the basis within that class. In terms of research, right, usually I tell my students that their dissertation should be able to be pulled apart into, 2 or 3, journal articles. And so, of course, you're going to have some really similar figures and text, and that's usually, I would say, expected in a dissertation. But right, what's, usually you sign that copyright over, you give, ownership to a publication, and so if you're doing that, you should probably change it slightly, and make it unique. You shouldn't be, posting the same figure in 3 different publications for sure. Right, but that's the benefit of being able to reference, your own published work. That's a good question. Someone online said, how can we access the recording of these sessions? Yeah, that's a really great question. I would assume the recording is recorded. I can tell you that much. And we'll post it on the website. So that's where you'll get it, on the website that you should hopefully all be loving after this talk. Someone says, as a TA, they've found students try to synthesize but are unclear in their writing, so it makes it difficult to understand what they're saying, and the end result is that they don't sound like they know what they're talking about. Yeah, right, that's true. It's hard. It takes a lot of practice to learn how to synthesize, and perhaps that's what grad school is for. The first homework assignment you turn in, you're not going to be great at synthesizing what you read, right? That's why this program isn't just 1 semester long. It's, several. So, it's a skill you'll get better at. And that's, again, what your professor, your advisor, your TA is there for, to kind of help work through the growing pains and become an expert in that. That's everything. Any other questions? Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, I guess it's probably not unique for people to write like one subject for maybe multiple conference papers and journal paper and their dissertation and stuff. And there's a temptation to just rip sections from one to the next, like introductions and stuff like that. Do you have advice on maybe how to not do that better ways?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, right, usually, again, right, your dissertation is going to be turned into a couple of papers, or, yeah, that's hard. Usually, if I am writing to one journal, I clearly define what my research objective is, and then I'll clearly define what the research objective is on this other one, and hopefully, right, they're separate research objectives, or they're separate research questions, and so, right, you should be finding literature, or your results should be really aimed at those research questions. So hopefully that kind of helps parse those out. But yeah, right, my methods section, usually I will have 3 papers written on the same driving study, and it's really hard to say I had 50 people drive around a track a bunch of different ways. So I think, usually I try to open a fresh document, perhaps not have a reference to what I did, because I'm probably not going to write the exact same thing verbatim what I did in a previous paper a couple months back. But yeah, that's challenging for sure.
Yeah, Can I add to that?
Please.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, I think the methods is usually one of the areas that's sort of safe to repeat. But what you always want to try and find is you're telling a different story with everything that you're doing. So if you're doing a different conference publication on the same study, usually your story should be different. It should be a different, so whether it's, the intentions or how you analyzed it or what you synthesized from your methods, should be fairly unique. Especially when you do papers, your results should always be unique. Like Erika mentioned, your figures should be unique, your tables should be unique. But the methods, you only can do so many ways. Like I did a survey and I wrote people and I answered it, so those things tend to be repeated quite a bit. There's some flexibility in there, but sometimes the introduction has to be different, like why you did something and how you result, or what were the results from that being very different.
Yeah, thanks. Probably just have time for one last question. So someone posted thoughts on working best with your TA, not just advisor. What does it take to be an effective TA? Yeah, that's a good question, right? So I guess, I kind of just focus more on advisor and faculty and not necessarily that like TA position, how you have a relationship with them. So I guess maybe there's kind of two parts to that. One, kind of maybe the student to the TA relationship, right? I mean, that the TA is usually your peer, and so perhaps they usually are a little more approachable, more forgiving, perhaps. So, I don't want to speak for the TAs, right? But I think they're there to be a resource as well, and so you definitely utilize, your TAs for sure. But if you're really struggling to connect with the TA, right? There's a TA and a professor for those classes. So, I don't know if I've too great of insight on that, but no, they should be approachable and want you to succeed as well. Same things apply. And what it takes to be an effective TA. I guess kind of going back to what my tips are, right? I think a lot of these could be applied to, if you want to be a good TA, right? So usually what makes me the most excited about a TA is that they're really proactive, right? They're beating me to reviewing assignments. They are, getting the, things graded, in a timely manner. So if, someone submits an assignment, usually each professor has a different criteria, but I like to have the feedback, within a week to the students. So I think that that third bullet of being proactive and practicing time management would really be effective. But then, also, being, in communication with the professor and just making sure that you're, doing exactly what they expect you to do is important. So that's a good question. All right, I think we only have like 40 seconds left. So I'll give you guys back your 40 seconds. I appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully this was helpful. I enjoyed, getting to see some faces that I haven't seen in classes for a while. So thank you all. Please feel free to grab one.